Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today for this webinar about the scalability of the Bonita platform. This webinar will be recorded and the video will be available on bonitasoft.com website. And if you have any question during this webinar, you can ask them using the GoToWebinar tool, and I will take time at the end of the webinar to answer them. Also, if you have any issue with the quality of the sound or the screen sharing GoToWebinar, please notify me in the question and I will try to adjust, if possible, the quality of this session. So first I will start with an overview of this session today. So our first point will be to try to clarify what we refer as scalability. What is a scalability system, kind of definition of scalability. Then we'll move on and try to explain why this really matters today, what this is really important for your end user mostly. We'll speak about also how we can measure the scalability of a system. We'll see that we have different options in terms of architecture when it comes to the scalability. So we'll explore different options. And we'll also try to provide keys to identify when a scalable system is needed, in which situation you should really focus on the scalability of your platform. Also in this webinar, we'll have of course a short demo to demonstrate the scalability, how the platform, how Bonita behaves when you have different configuration and how we deal with you can deal with scalability on the Bonita platform. So let's start right now, and we'll first have this definition of scalability. So first quote is from Wikipedia, and try to define what is the scalability of a system. So it's basically this capability of the system as a whole, like every component of the system. It's the network, it's the server, it's the software, every piece of the system, how it handles a growing amount of work, how we handle this, how we deal with this load that came from the user, from external system, and how it adapts to accommodate that growth. A second definition is more on how you prove that your system is scalable, and a system will be qualified as scalable if it manages to improve its performance when you allocate more resources to the system. So for example, if you increase the server memory, hard drive performance, all these parameters, and you see that you have increased performance of your system as a whole, like the solution is more performant, your system is scalable. But we'll see that we have different options when it comes to scalability. It's not only necessary about improving the existing hardware, but you have other options. But before we jump into the technical detail and we speak about the architecture, first it's important to focus on why scalability matters, what is important, and what you should do first when you're thinking about the scalability of your platform. So ultimately the goal of the scalability is really scalability is about the quality of service really for your end users. Usually when you're thinking about the scalability, you're thinking about a growth of the usage of your platform, so maybe more users or new usage of your platform, and you want to make sure that the user experience of all your users is still great, that the system is available, the user doesn't expect any slowness when they try to connect to the platform, and there is various ways to measure, and not really measure, but more various goals that you can define when you try to identify the key information to monitor for the scalability of your system. For example, you might want to deal with the duration of the execution of your process. When you speak about Bonita is a development application platform based on process, so you might want to focus on how long it takes to process to execute. Or maybe you want to be at a higher level, more on the end user side, and you want to focus on the response time when the user tries to load a form to perform a task, for example. This is all related to performance, and performance is highly related to the scalability of the system. There is also other objectives you might have, like for example, if you have a fully automated process that's mostly behave as an orchestrator among other automatic systems, like for example orchestrate a set of web service, you might want to measure the time that is required to execute one single task. And so you can see here you have a wide variety of goals, and it's important to identify which one is yours when you start to deal with a scalability project. And it's only once you define your goals that then you will work on the KPIs to measure and the protocol you will set up for your scalability test. Also, one thing that is important and is highly related to scalability is really to be able to anticipate the new usage of your platform, and also maybe the growth of your users. Even today's, I think you probably don't really know what will be the usage of your platform in the next decade. You don't really know what will become next. Maybe we'll have this acquisition that doubles the number of the users of your platform, or maybe you will deploy this new application that generates a new load on the system, for example, some highly CPU processing that use highly the CPU, like for example video processing. You don't know what's come next, so it's really important that the platform is scalable in order to evolve with your usage. I can catch up with what you need from your platform. So as I said, once you define your goals, you now can define what you want to measure and also how you will measure that. So that's two different points. The first one is about what should be your KPI, your metrics you want to follow. You want maybe to measure the API response time if you deal with integration with third-party system. For example, if you have an ESB that starts a Bonita process, or RPA that start a Bonita process, it might be important that the initiation of a new process is done within this amount of milliseconds, for example. Or you maybe want to measure this response time to load a web form for your users, or how long it takes to complete a certain amount of process instance. So there is various KPI you might want to measure, and so based on your goal, you will define the appropriate set of KPIs to make sure that you reach your goal. The second part, and it's really, I think, the key part here, and the one that is often forgot about, is the protocol, how you will run your test, how you will run your measurement. It's really different from a system perspective. If you ask him to start 100 process immediately, then asking him to start 100 process on a 1 hour window frame. If you spread the process creation along a large period of time, you might really see different results because the platform will not be kind of dealing with this peak at the start and might be more performant overall to execute all the process instance compared to dealing with this huge load increment on a very short period. So the protocol is important. You don't measure the same thing. Also, for example, you might have a profile where you want to make sure that your platform is able to serve 100 users, for example, all day long. So like you know that you will have average 100 users connected to the platform and performing tasks all day long. So in such situation, you will probably have a protocol that start 100 process on the platform and make this load constant, like all day long. Try to always have 100 process instance running and to see how many you can run during the day. So various options to define your test here. So in the demonstration, I will show you a scenario where we try to have 20 instances of a process running together all time and see how long it takes to complete 400 instances of the process. So now we already speak about the goal, the KPI to measure, the protocol to do your test, but what are the solutions really to make sure that the system is scalable? And we have basically two main options to make sure that the system is scalable. The first one is to have what we call the vertical scalability. And it's basically just to tune the hardware of the server and change, for example, the amount of memory available and to change the CPU of the server, maybe to have a more performant version. So really to make the existing platform grow, like allocate more resources on the existing computer. The second one, that is referred as horizontal scalability, is another approach where instead of adding extra resources to existing server, you will add a second or a third server on the side and have this cluster of server that will all together serve the users. And in front of this cluster of server, you will have a load balancer that is in charge of dispatching the load, the workload among all the cluster nodes. So I will get into detail later on these two different approaches and what is the benefit of each of them. But first, maybe I will start the demonstration. So this way the demonstration can run while we were continuing the presentation. So first of all, I will show you a little bit what is the configuration we have right now for this demonstration. So for this demonstration, I'm using EC2. Actually, I have a slide here with a sum up. We have two different Bonita configuration. One with a single mount. We are running this on Amazon AWS. So we're using EC2 for the deployment of this configuration. We have a single node with one micro instance for Bonita and one for the database that is used by Bonita. And we have a cluster version with two nodes in the cluster, so we basically double the configuration of the single node. Plus we add one extra instance for the load balancer, and this one is not a micro instance, it's nano instance because the load balancer have less processing to do, so it requires less performance. And on top of that, we have a separated instance that run a custom development to inject the load on the Bonita platform. And here we use a medium instance. This configuration here as is important, because what really is important in this configuration is that the injector is more powerful than the Bonita platform itself, because we really don't want the injector to slow down our test, because if the injector is too slow, we might have the same performance on the single node and on the clusters, because Bonita will just wait for the information from the injector. If it's too slow to ask the creation of new process instance, basically Bonita will just wait. So here we make sure that the injector is more powerful compared to the Bonita instance. So it's really here an highlight on why the protocol of your test is important. And at Bonita Soft, based on all the tests we do on the platform, since at least the version 6 and probably before that, but honestly I'm not really aware of what happened before the version 6 on this side of scalability, but at least for a long time we already ran such a test, and we know from that that really the protocol is a key part, as well as having the proper KPI defined to measure the performance. The other part of our scenario here is the profile of the load we'll create on our Bonita platform. So in this test, as I said previously, we'll try to have continuously 20 running Bonita process instance, and we want to run a total of 400 instances of the process. So basically the injector will create 20 instances, and as soon as one instance is finished, it will ask for the creation of a new one. It doesn't ask for the creation of 400 instances one shot. It's more simulate continuous user load, having 20 instances running in parallel at all time. And what we want to measure here is the total execution time to run all the process instances. So as I say, to run this test, we use custom development here. It's the Bonita injector. So here I'm connected on the injector AWS instance, and I will launch this test. So basically this test will deploy the process definition we use for the test and trigger the creation of the instance and make sure that we have these 20 instances running at all time. This is currently a custom development, but this will become available probably in some next version of what we call Bonita Continuous Delivery. This Bonita Continuous Delivery is a component that helps the setup and the deployment of a Bonita instance on premises or also on the cloud. It's what I used to have this set up on AWS here. It's helped me to actually create for me the different AWS EC2 instance. So the one for Bonita, the one for the database, and also it takes care for me, sorry, it's not on the instance here. It takes care of me also, it takes care for me about the creation of the load balancer and the configuration of the cluster. So it's really a great help when you want to deploy either on-premise or also here in the cloud, because it deals with all the deployment and it can automate the creation of the instance. So for example, if your load balancer detects that the currently running nodes are overloaded, it might be used to create a new instance on the flight and allocate it to the cluster, to the running cluster, to spread the load across more nodes. So get back here to my injector and I will launch it. And now if I switch to my Bonita platform that is running, so I have it here, I'm on this single node, we'll just need to reconnect here, but you will be able to see that we have some running instance here. You can actually see the 20 running instance here. were created just right now. And we are watching right now the running instance, and I can check the archived instance here, and I can see that I already have 20 instances finished, and I have more instances currently running in the open cases here. I have this continuous load of 20 instances. So I will let this test run, and when this one is finished, we'll get back to it and run the same test on the cluster, and we'll be able to compare the results. So now let's get back to the definition of the different architecture available to have a scalable system. So of course, I'll speak in this presentation about Bonita. You already know probably that, or you already probably guess that Bonita is scalable. It's kind of obvious, but what is important is scalability of Bonita. Bonita is able to do this vertical scalability, the one I'm showing here, when you allocate more resources to your existing server. So this is a vertical scalability. For example, you upgrade your CPU to the most recent version, or you allocate more RAM, or maybe it's a virtual system, so you can maybe tune this live. For example, on AWS, you might want to adjust the type of instance you are using to run your Bonita platform. But the other option is to have this horizontal scalability, so having a cluster environment of Bonita. And in this case, you basically add a new node to your existing one, you put in front of this the load balancer, and you spread the load across different servers. A key benefit from this horizontal scalability is also that it brings you the high availability feature. Because you have two nodes, now if one node fails, Bonita is able to recover the running process instance on the second node. So you make sure you have a guarantee that your platform is available at all time. You reduce the risk of having your service down, because you have multiple nodes, and if one fails, of course you will have this decrease in terms of performance, but at least the system will still be available. So that's really a key added value of the horizontal scalability. And also horizontal scalability is usually more easy to deploy, especially in the cloud environment now. It's really easy to have new instance on the fly really quickly. With the Bonita tooling, you can have a new node of Bonita running in only a few minutes, less than 5 minutes. So it's really what seems now the most popular approach to scalability is to have the horizontal scalability, but of course Bonita is able to benefit from the two different approaches. I will just do now a quick check on my running test to see what are the progress. Just as a reminder, I'm running only one node here, so it might take a little bit of time to process all the instance of my test scenario. So just let's check what is the current status of the platform. So yeah, I will refresh the list of open cases, and now I have no longer any cases running. If I check the archived one, you can see that I just run 400 of them. And if we compare the start date of this one, so this one, the last was started 4:26. I will go to the first one, and it was started at 4:22, so like 4 minutes to run all of them approximately. So now let's launch the same test, the exact same test scenario with the cluster environment. Okay, so now let's launch our test, but this time on our cluster setup. So we'll have the exact same test scenario with a 400 process instance running, but this time it will be sent to the load balancers and we will split the load among the two nodes we have. So the load balancer is running, and if we go to the portal here, we'll refresh the list of currently executing cases, and you can see that we have 20 cases running on, so the same test scenario as previously. And we can check the status of the archive case, and I guess here you can see we already have a few cases already finished and archived. So as the same manner as previous test, here I will wait for this test to finish, and then we'll be able to compare how long it takes to run the 400 process instance on this cluster configuration compared to the single node configuration. The results. So now maybe a reminder about all this benefit you get from the horizontal scalability. So like all kind of scalability, you have this extra guarantee on the quality of service, because you know that if the load of the platform is growing, we'll always be able to deal with it and in a quite easy approach. Like adding a node to a Bonita cluster is really easy. So no matter what will come next, if you have more users, if you deploy more application within your company, you will always be able to cope with the new load on the platform. Also, you're almost acting in real time. As it said, it's only a matter of a few minutes to add a new node. So as soon as you detect that your platform reach a certain load, you can automatically add this new node to the cluster, and the benefit is immediate. It's on the fly. It's not like you need to shut down the server, act on the server, add hard drive or memories or anything. The service is available at all time for the currently existing user, and as soon as you update the configuration, all the new usage of the platform can be run on these two nodes, and so it benefits immediately from it. And you really have this extra benefit that I think is important to remember, is that horizontal scalability brings the high availability feature. So you have this extra guarantee on the quality of service in case of hardware failure or any issue on one node. The service is still available for all your users. Now the last slide of this presentation before I get back to our test result and then move to your question is how you identify when scalability is required, when you should really pay attention to scalability. I think first point is probably when someone mentioned to you the criticality of the application of the service. If it's key in the company, if it's really core business, you probably want to have this kind of deployment to make sure that the platform will not be a bottleneck in the business, like in the way to process the daily job. And also it's related to high availability, this critical application. We always want to have this high availability because we never know what can happen with the hardware or the software running on one specific node. So for example, if you are into banking, for example, if you deal with loan requests, so key process, key business process, you probably want to have this kind of setup. If it's more a support system for the company, I don't have any real example of what is not really critical, but you can have more little process, support process. It might not require scalability, but usually the Bonita platform will deploy different processes, and all of them, at least most of them, can benefit from a cluster setup. So I will always recommend to come with this kind of setup for a platform as soon as you have critical process or when you expect some growth in the usage of the platform. So sometimes you might identify, you might plan this growth in the usage. You might have this plan where you plan to have a first Bonita application deployed this year by the end of the year, and maybe next year you plan to have 2 or 3 different new applications for other service in the company or for new key project, new offer to your customers. And so if you are able to anticipate this future growth, you might want to have a setup in cluster. One key advantage of the cluster setup is also that right now maybe you only need 2 nodes to deal with the current load of your project, and so you can retune the configuration based on your usage. So you only pay for the 2 nodes currently running. If you're running, for example, in the cloud, you'll pay only for these 2 instances. And maybe when your usage evolves, you will need a 3rd or 4th nodes in the cluster, but you will only get charged at this time. So it's really helpful to finally adjust your platform to your usage and only pay for the actual usage of the platform, so you optimize the cost of the platform. So this is really important when you deal with the budget of the cloud infrastructure. Also, the situation where scalability is useful is when your usage varies from day to days or per quarter, seasonally, or there is different situation. I remember, for example, one of our customers that was using, so it was a government, it was using Bonita for different projects about paperless administration, but it was also using Bonita process for election. And so basically on a year of election, on a few days after election, they got this huge peaks related with the election. So to accommodate this really huge load on a short time frame that happened one time every few years, it's really interesting to have a cluster, because you will only allocate 600 for this period of time, this exceptional period of time. And finally, if you are in a cloud environment, I think it's always interesting to think about cluster, because it's so easy to set up this kind of architecture in the cloud that I think it would be a shame to not benefit from it right from the start. And this way you make the future more safer, because you know that you can really adjust to what's coming next. And just to look back on what I start first, I think what is important is clearly to write down your goal, then define the KPI and the protocol that will help you to guarantee that you reach this goal. So of course, as I said, right now this performance testing tool is a custom development of Bonita, but we aim to provide this to our customers. And of course, we have a professional service team that is here to help our customer to finally tune and size the Bonita platform to meet the current and future demand of the platform based on each customer usage. And last reminder about this horizontal scalability that also bring the high availability So really a great solution to guarantee the quality of service to the end users. So now I'm done with the presentation, and I just want to get back to the test results and see if we are done with the execution of all the cases. So if I'm here and I will try to refresh this list, and so now you can see that our injector has finished his job. All instances have been created, and let's check on the list of open cases here. We can see that we have no more cases open, so all of them have been processed. And if we check about how long it took from the last case here at 3:48 compared to the first one that was here at 3:35, so it took a little bit more than 2 minutes, 3 minutes here to run all the cases. So we can see the better performance we got with the cluster configuration. It's close to being 2 times faster than the single node configuration. And so you can really see immediately the benefit of such configuration in terms of performance. We really improve the overall performance of the solution by adding this extra node. So now I'm done with the demonstrations, and I'm ready to answer all the questions you might have and send in GoToWebinar. So I have a question regarding the setup from the database perspective, because you know that Bonita engine use database to store all the data related to process execution. And so I asked if we use multiple storage also, or if it's the same DB across all nodes. So the database is actually the way we synchronize the data across all nodes. So the database is shared by all nodes, but the database setup itself can also be a clusters. So if database become the limitation in terms of performance of the Bonita platform, some option to have a cluster of database can be done to guarantee the performance. Also, we know that we have different performance based on the kind of database you use. So, for example, if you go for the open source database, we usually recommend PostgreSQL over MySQL, and we usually know that Oracle comes with native support of transaction over SQL servers that require additional configuration for transaction. So I'm not really sure on that particular point, but I guess that Oracle is maybe more suitable for better performance if you go for the proprietary database vendor. So also I have a question regarding cache usage on each instance, on each node, and how they are synchronized. So yes, of course, in terms of performance, so performance is not only about having a cluster setup, it's also about a lot of different optimization, and actually we did a lot of them in the product over time. In each version we try to improve the performance. We have more and more indicators we measure to guarantee the performance of the solution, and we have cache on each node, and they are synchronized among all of them. Technically, I'm sorry, I don't remember which technical solution we use to guarantee the cache synchronization, but I can guarantee that we use cache to guarantee the performance, the overall performance of the solution. Okay, so I have a question regarding the configuration of the application when you have an unplanned growth. So I guess this is on the Bonita, the application you deploy in Bonita maybe. So application deploy in Bonita can be reconfigured live. So if you need to adjust settings such as maybe switch to a different a new instance of an external services, for example, the Bonita application has this capability to be live update, so reconfigure on the fly. But if you speak about Bonita itself, the reconfiguration of the Bonita engine itself, I think it will depend on the settings you adjust. Some of them might require a restart of the platform. Some of them might be taken into account on the fly. I'm not really sure about this. If you need further detail on the tuning you can already do on the performance of the platform, I recommend you to check the documentation. There is in the documentation information about performance tuning, and also get in touch with us so we can provide more detailed answer to your specific use case. Also a question related to the number of nodes we can use in the cluster. So is there a limitation of the number of nodes? As far as I know, we don't have any limitation in the number of nodes in the cluster. Usually this kind of standard setup, I guess, is around at least 4 nodes in a cluster, but of course minimum is 2. But as far as I know, there is no limitation in terms of number of nodes in the cluster. So for the load balancing, how we handle load balancing, actually we use HA proxy to deal with load balancing. I can maybe show you the HA proxy here. We have this monitoring on HA proxy, and you can see here monitoring information between my 2 nodes and the loads sent to each 2 nodes. I start 1 node and the other one after, so it's why the load is not even on the 2 nodes, but you can see the load balancing. So load balancing is still with HA proxy here. In terms of server restart, honestly, I don't know the detail about how the load will be balanced again when you restart the server, but usually, of course, user will be able to continue the already running process after a server restart. For the database cluster, I think it will be usually just a generic solution. There should not be anything specific to Bonita. And for the database, we recommend for clustering. Honestly, I don't have the answer right now. My guess is that should be found on PostgreSQL based on the information I have, but also most likely on Oracle. And I've seen some cluster setup of MySQL. So on this 3DB, I'm pretty sure that cluster configuration can be achieved. I will thank you all for your participation to this webinar. And if you have more questions about Bonita cluster setup or performance, feel free to contact us. You have the contact us form on our website, or if you are are already a client of Bonita Soft, you can contact your sales rep and ask him all the questions you have. Okay, so I have an extra question. So question about the engine database. So in cluster, if you need more than one schema, so the database, it's just fine to have one, and you still have one single schema of the Bonita engine database, and it's okay to have one single node running the database server. It's just in terms of performance. If we identify that the database becomes the limitation point of the performance of the cluster setup, then we might have a different approach on the database configuration. We might set up a cluster, but this could be a cluster of the database. It's not a cluster on the Bonita side. From the Bonita perspective, all Bonita nodes will still be connected to one single database. Behind it might be a cluster, but in the same way as an end user of Bonita connect to a Bonita platform and is not aware that behind the URL we type in the browser there is actual several Bonita nodes. Here the Bonita nodes will, when they connect to the database, they will not be aware of having this multiple database running. Well, thank you for your participation and wish you a nice day. Thanks.